Ezra Hashem, today's daf is Masech Bava Metzia, daf Vav. We will begin from daf Hey Amid Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, Ibay Lahu. So that we're discussing over here is the Gemara just got through saying that there is an assumption, a presumed majority assumption, whatever you want to call it, that most people will not pay a loan before the due date. Okay, that's so if a guy says that I paid my loan in before it came due, we don't believe him. So now the Gemara asks a question of maybe we could believe the person when he says that if he could have said something better. Let's see. The best thing a person can say is that when the loan came due, I paid it on time. That is a believable statement. So they asked the question in the yeshiva. Tava'u la'achar zman. They claim the lender asked for his money, let's say a month after the loan was due. Va'amaloi, and the borrower said, Praticha b'soich zmani. Not only I paid you, but I paid you even before the term was up. So now that statement, I paid you before the term was up, is not such a believable statement, but he could have said a better statement. He could have said that I paid you when the term was up. So, Mahu, what would be the law in this case? Me, Amrim, do you say, Bimkaim Chazaka, even though there is an assumption nobody pays the loan early, and we say you'd believe him in this case because Mali L'Shaker. Why did he have to lie? He could have said, I paid you when on time. So since he has that what's called a migoy against the chazaka, the migoy would win. So we say the migoy wins over here because he could have said a bigger lie. So, and the fact that he didn't, so let's believe him when he says praticha b'soich zmani, I paid it early. Oi, we go to the top of the page of Vav. Oi Dilmar, or maybe bimkoim chazaka lo yamrina mali l'shakar. Since we have a chazaka that nobody pays a loan early, we don't say that we don't say that despite the fact that he has a migoy called mali l'shaker, that will override the chazaka that a person does not pay on before the loan is due. So therefore, the migoy will not overpower that chazaka that says, hey, it must be saying a lie that you paid the loan early. So this is the question that the Gemara asks. So the Gemara goes further and tries to bring a proof from our Mishnah. Remember, our Mishnah discussed with a wall that collapsed. So the wall that collapsed. So we say becheskas shenosan. We assume that then one of the guys built up the wall, and now he claims that the other guy didn't chip in for his share of the wall. I mean, they built up the wall up to Dalet Amas. He built a 4 amma wall, and he said, "Hey, my neighbor should have chipped into the wall." So we assume the Mishnah says that the neighbor chipped in. Until the claimant says, "Oh, the neighbor did not chip in." He proves it by, let's say, he had Adam say were there when he claimed, and the guy said, "I'm not paying." But we assume that he did pay. So, hey, Chidami, what is the neighbor saying? The one that built the wall, what is he claiming? He's claiming after he built the wall, he's going back to the neighbor and say, "Hey, pay me for the wall that you're supposed to chip in." And the neighbor said, "Praticha bismani, I paid it in time." So of course, pshita, that is simple. Of course, the neighbor is believed because he's saying, "I paid it in time." So you're going to believe him. Elalav, it must be the amalei that the claimant says praticha b'soich zmani, that the one that's getting claimed, he says not only did I pay you on time, I didn't even pay you on time. I paid you before the wall was built up, and so we see that even though generally people don't pay something early, he's the novelty of the Mishnah, the chiddush of the Mishnah is that if a person does say I paid you early, and he could have said a bigger lie, so we'll believe him when he says, I paid you early. Alma, so we see from here, afila bimkoim chazaka amrina mali l'shakar, that even though there's a chazaka, most people don't pay early, but because he could have said a better lie, we will believe him in this case when he says praticha b'soich's money. I paid you early, so that should solve the dilemma of the ibaya. And says the Gemara, shana hacha d'chol safa v'safa zimnuhu. That means every row of brick that was laid to build this wall, that's called zman. That's called when the money is due. So there's no such a thing when you owe somebody for building a wall that you say you paid him early. As soon as you put down one row of the wall, you owe him money. So at that time, the money is due. So there is no chazak over here that he says I'm paying early. Because if he says I paid you when the wall was halfway built, that's also called paying on time. Because you can see a wall that was built and he didn't chip in yet. So that's called the time that he's supposed to pay. On the other hand, when it comes to a loan, and a loan has a due date, right? But up until that due date, nothing is due. So we have a chazaka that most people will not pay a loan early. And therefore, if a person says, I paid the loan early, even though he has a migoy, we will not believe him. Tashma, come in here. Midalar amas ulamala ein mechai v'noisa. The Mishnah says that if the guy built 4 amas and above, let's say he was only supposed to build a dollar amma wall, a 4 amma wall, and then what happened was he's decided to build a 10 amma wall. So then the other neighbor doesn't have to chip in. But but let's say the other neighbor built an adjacent wall to match the wall that the neighbor built. And why did he do that? Because when you build another wall, he wants to put a roof over it, so it'll have another place to hang out underneath. So then it shows that he agreed to the fact that the other neighbor rebuilt the wall to the original height. So then we assume that he didn't pay for that extra height until he proves it that he did pay for that other wall, that he did pay for the extra height. Now, so that's other than that, we assume that he didn't pay for it. Hey chedami. So what's the case over there? That the guy who built the tall wall, right? He now is coming to claim that you didn't pay for the extra overage from Dalar Amos and above, and he claimed it after he completed the wall. And the other person says, Pratika Bismani, I paid it on time. So he paid it. I paid you after the wall was built, and you went over, and I showed you that I'm an agreement to that, so I paid it. So the Gemara says, Amai loy. Then why isn't he believed? Why isn't he believed? He said, Praticha Bismani. Elalav, the Omar, he said, Praticha B'soyismani. He's now saying, I paid it even before you built the overage. When you were intending to build, let's say, 10 amma wall, when you built 8 ammas already, I paid you for it. So he's saying, Praticha B'soyismani. Oh, in that case, he's not believed. Even though there's a migoy, he could have said, I paid you after the wall was built. Alma, so we see from our Mishnah, Bim koim chazaka lo yamrina mali l'shakar, that if there is a chazaka, that you're saying that nobody pays early, we don't say that, oh, you could have said a better lie, let's believe you. No, we don't believe you. So we see that migoy does not override a chazaka that tells me that you shouldn't be believed. And says the Gemara, here, there's another chazaka that the person would never pay in this particular case on time, early. You see, a loan, it's possible a person will pay early. Let's say he got a distribution or a dividend, and he wants to pay his loan before the term comes due. I can hear that. But here, in this case, when his neighbor is going above and beyond what he's supposed to do, the guy that's supposed to chip in will think to himself, maybe the rabbis are not going to require me to pay for this because he's doing above and beyond what's necessary. He's supposed to only build a 4 amma wall. Now he's building a 10 amma wall. So perhaps I don't even have to chip in. So therefore, it makes it more unbelievable when he says, I paid you prior to the wall was being built. Usually what's going to happen is that the wall will be built to, let's say, to 10 amas. Then the guy is going to bring him to Bezdin and say, hey, you got to pay me extra from 4 amas to 10 amas because you indicated by building an adjacent wall that you enjoyed that I built this wall, rebuilt this wall to 10 amas. So that's why, in that case, Pratisha B'Soich's money would not be believed. Tosh Omalei Rav Acha Bereid Rava L'Ravashi. Toshma, come in here. Manali B'Yadcha. The guy says, this is a Mishnah Shavuos. Guy says, you owe me money. Amalei Hen. He says, yes, I agree, I owe you money. Lamacha Amalei. The next day he said to Nehu Li, give it to me. You said you owe me money. You agreed that you owed me money. Amar, if the guy says Nisativ Lach I already paid you potter, you potter. Ein lecha biyadi, but if he says I don't have anything in my hands, chayev, you chayev to pay. Wait a second. He says I don't have it, or he says ein lecha biyadi, you're obligated to pay. Now, what's the difference between the sativ lach, I paid you, that you're not obligated to pay, when he says ein lecha biyadi, my love? Ein nesativ lach, when he says I gave it to you, the amalei paraticha bizmani, I paid you on time. Ein lecha biyadi, when he says I don't, you don't have anything by me. I mean, I don't owe you anything. The amalei, he's saying praticha b'soichs mani, I paid you early. V'ketani chayev. Alma, so we see bimkoim chazaka le'amrim ali l'shaka. He's not believed by saying praticha b'soichs mani, even though he had a migoi. He could have said I paid you bizmani, I paid you on time. So why don't we believe him when he says praticha b'soichs mani? So we see that bimkoim chazaka, if you have a chazaka that he wouldn't do such a thing, we won't say, oh, migoim can override it and make it believable. So that's what you assume ein lecha biyadi. So Gemara says no. Really, if there was just that, we would believe him if he says praticha b'soichs mani. But my ein lecha biyadi, when he says I don't owe you anything, he says lo hoya devar ma'olam. He totally denies that he owed money, and there's the problem, because the guy said you owed me money, and yesterday you said I agree with that. Now you can't say, oh, I don't owe you any money more. The Amma Umar, because we learned if a person says I didn't borrow, is as if he says I didn't pay back, and he's saying I never borrowed money from you. So basically, he says I never paid you back. And if he says I never paid you back, then why the other day when I approached him, when the lender approached him, he said in front of Adim, yes, I agree, I owe you money. So that's why he's not believed over there. The Gemara says the Gemara talks about Samach loy koisel acha megalgal olav es hakoil. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says we learned that if he built an adjacent wall, then an adjacent wall, even though he didn't build it totally to agree with what the current wall is. So I just want to, so that you can visualize it. If Shimon built the wall over here, and he extended his wall all the way down, and Reuven only built a little part of that wall, but he appreciates that Shimon built the wall higher, so now he could lean beams across. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna, samach lapalga, samach l'kula. If he, appreciated that he built half the wall, if he only built a half a wall, Reuven built a half a wall, he has to pay for the whole wall. That's what he said, because he appreciates that there's a wall, an adjacent wall, where he can put cross beams across. Rav Nachman Amar, he only has to pay for this part of the wall, only what he's using. The other part of the wall that Shimon built, he didn't have, Shimon could have built it. Again, all this is above 4 amas, so he's showing that Reuven appreciates that the wall was rebuilt above 4 amas. The question is, does he have to pay for that extra overage? So according to this opinion, he has to pay for the extra overage that he's using, but not the one that Shimon extended beyond what Reuven built, side by side, opposite. Umoide Rav Huna. Rav Huna said that you have to pay for the whole wall, but Karna Velufsa. And Karna Velufsa means if you indicated that you're not going to extend it. You see, the difference is in this wall, Reuven potentially could go further. But when he cornered it off, so then he showed that he's not going to extend it, and therefore he only pays to what's opposite the wall. And that's it. Umayde Rav Nachman, Ba'prizu of Kata de Kshure, Rav Nachman said that if the guy put into his wall all these indications that he's in his wall, that he wants to use it for cross beams and things like that, he wants to put a cross beam in there. So then it's he would have to pay for the entire extension of that wall. That's what it says. Kavia Deshara is this, where is a place for a cross beam. So now the Gemara says like this. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, Bei kavi loy hava kazaka, va'am va'af loy hava kazaka, va'af agaf da'arvat him late, da'amli milichi pasti loy listre ishti, loy istre ashisai. That means that if you are allowed to, just because you put a little hole over there, that's not considered a chazaka. In other words, what the Gemara now switches gears, and this should be a different color, Amar Rav Huna. But basically, what the Gemara is now switching gears to, what happens if you always had the right to use somebody's property, whatever it is, you had the right to use his wall. You have a right to use his wall, and he didn't complain about it. So what Rav Huna is saying over here, if let's read the Rashi. Shimon that lifted his and he made walls, he made windows for Reuven to put his beams in there. That doesn't mean that Reuven has a right to use that wall. In other words, let's see the picture over here. Again, the one that built the wall is claiming to the other person that you didn't pay me for the wall. But let's say he put in holes in the wall, right? Where the other guy could already put in beams and a sill, like a square thing. And he claims you didn't pay for any of this wall. And the other guy says, I did pay for it. We can assume that the person that says that says he paid for it, the one that's being claimed against, he did not pay for it. The first guy did everything to accommodate the second guy, right? He accommodated him by putting this wall. So why would he do such a thing unless the other guy already chipped in for the wall? The answer is because he says, I'm going to do it now because I know that eventually you're going to want to participate in this wall. So instead of doing it later, because that will mess up the foundation, I'm going to do it as I built it to accommodate you, but you didn't pay for it yet. That's what he's saying. I built these things so to accommodate you, but the fact is you didn't pay for it. Just alone that you see me accommodating you is no proof that you paid for it, and therefore he would be believed. Rav Nachman said, let's say you have a right to lean your beams on your friend's wall. If you if you have a right to lean thin beams, you don't have a right to put on heavy beams. But if you could put on heavy beams, then you have a right to put thin beams on. In other words, you've been using these walls for years. Your friend never said anything, but you were only using it for leaning against your friend's wall thin beams. Now you want to change it to use thick beams, you're not allowed to do that. Rav Yosef says, if you are using thin beams, you can use heavy beams. Others say, Rav Nachman is saying what Rav Yosef is saying. If you're using no matter what beam you were using, if you were using a thin beam and you want to change it to a thick beam, then you have a right to do so. That in a thick beam, changing it for a thin beam. Because once your friend allowed you to use his wall, and for so many years you've been using his wall and he didn't say anything, so it must be he doesn't mind. And really, it's like an acquired usage of his wall. It's almost like if you have if for so many years you've been cutting through somebody's backyard to get to shul, and it's almost like an acquired right. So if you have using somebody's wall, leaning beams against that wall, so it's an acquired right to continue to do so. Amar Rav Yosef, Rav Nachman said, "Achsek lenatvi, achsek leshavche." If you used if your rain falling off your roof would fall over any place on that person's yard, then achsek leshavche, then you could put a drain pipe there to force the rainwater to go into one place in your friend's yard, because that's better. It's not going all over the place. You're putting in a drain pipe which drains the water to one location in your friend's yard. Achsek l'shavchei le'achsek l'natfei. If you're using your friend for with a drain pipe, all the years you had a drain pipe going, draining the rain off your roof into one location in your friend's yard, you can't now change it around and take away the drain pipe, so all the rain goes all over the place in your friend's backyard, in your friend's yard. Even if you had a presumptive usage to use it with a drain pipe, you could use it even without a drain pipe. Ike the Amrei says, Amr Nachman, achsel l'shafrei, achsel l'natfei, l'natfei, achsel l'shafrei, aval tzrifa de irbini loy. Here, Rav Nachman said, no matter what, if for years and years the rain washed over your roof and fell into your neighbor's yard, that's okay, no matter, even if you had a drain pipe there or if you didn't have a drain pipe there. Your friend gave you permission to have the rain coming from your house into his yard. But if you're going to use a willow tree roof, you're going to change your roof to make it a willow tree roof, then that somehow this willow tree roof makes a lot of rain come into your neighbor's yard, and maybe he wouldn't agree to that. You can change your roof to a willow tree roof, even though a lot of rain will fall into your neighbor's yard. Rav Yosef Rav Yosef actually paskined in a situation. Maybe he did it himself. He changed his rain was falling off his house into his neighbor's house, and he even changed the roof to be a willow tree roof, which caused a lot of rain to fall into his neighbor's yard, because he had this presumptive right for all the years that he lived next to his neighbor, that the rain coming off his house would enter his neighbor's yard, and his neighbor didn't complain against that. Amar Rav Nachman, this is Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Bavua. Hamaske bias lechaveira. We go to Amid Beis. You rent a room, a house. Let's say you rented a room of your friend, Babira Gedola, in a big house. So you rented a room. Mishtamish bizuzeha. You're allowed to use the beams, protrusions, and walls. Adalar amas till 4 amas away from your room. And the thickness of the wall, right? Aval betarbitz apandone loy. Rav Nachman didei ama afila betarbitz apadene loy. That means you're allowed to use the inside of the house, all the protrusions, and hang things up or whatever, but you're not allowed to use the front yard. Rav Nachman says, you amar afila betarbitz apadane. You're allowed to use the front yard. You rented a room, that gives you a right to use the front yard. But you cannot use the backyard. The Rava says, you're allowed to use even the backyard. Now the Gemara says like this, Amar Ravina, saying this is all discussing one concept over here, which is that once somebody lets you use something and doesn't say anything, you can continue to use it. Ravina said, Hi kushur de metaltel. Let's say a beam, a cross beam, and you're leaving it against somebody else's house. Till 30 days, you don't have a presumptive right to leave it there. If it was there for 30 days and the owner of the house didn't say anything, that you're leaning something against his house, you have a continued right to use it. The mitzvah, if you're using the sukkah of a mitzvah, for 7 days, if you're leaning it against somebody's house, you don't have a right to continue leaving it there. Basra shivin yom, but after 7 days, where the guy assumed and thought you're going to remove it, and then you didn't remove it, and the owner of the house didn't say anything that your sukkah is leaning against his house. Hava chazaka, that's a presumptive right, and you can continue leaving it there. V'ichabre betina, if you connected it with cement to the other guy's house, and he didn't say anything, alta hava chazaka, that's a presumptive right. You can continue to you continue to leave it there. One more last piece of Gemara. Amar Abaya, Abaya says, Shnei batim b'shnei sidei reshus harabim. Zeh oisem makal lechatzi gagoy, v'zeh oisem makal lechatzi gagoy. Zeh shloi keneged. Zeh umadif. So, two houses on two sides of reshus harabim. Each one now could look into through their roofs into the other guy's property, in the other guy's roof. Two rooftops facing each other. So each one builds a half a wall, a little past the halfway mark, and this one, the opposite side, builds it from the other end, the other half, and therefore, basically, they're not looking to each other. So the Gemara asks a question, my iri b'shus harabim, why does it say that they're facing each other? Two rooftops that are facing each other on opposite sides of a reshus harabim, afilu reshus hayachid nami, even if they were facing each other on a private street, they have to build a roof, because we're saying hezek riyah, we want privacy, and therefore each one should be required to at least build a half a fence to block the other guy from seeing into his property. And says the Gemara, Reshus harabim itzruchalei. I have to teach you the din of Reshus harabim. Mao, the same I would have thought. Soif, iboya, let's do nim b'mnei Reshus harabim. The guy could say to him that, why don't you build the whole fence? Don't require me to build half and you build half. You should build the whole thing. Because you anyway trying to build a wall so that the people, the Reshus harabim, don't look at your what's going on in your rooftop. Kamash Malon, so the answer is the other guy could require him to make the other half of the fence. Damalei Rabin b'yaman chazali b'lay l'loy chazali. At night, the Reshus harabim, and during the day, people could only see me during the day. B'layla loy chazali. At night, they can't see me. But you are on the opposite side of the other rooftop. Bein binyama, bein b'yalayim chazasle. You can see me both during the daytime and the nighttime. Iname, Rabin, the people on the street, ki kamina, when I'm standing, chazali ki yasivna, when I'm sitting, li chazali, they can't see me. At chazali ben ki amina, ben ki yasivna. You can see me when I'm standing and when I'm sitting. Rabim, the people on the street, ki ma'ayni li chazali, if they're paying attention, they can see what's doing on my roof. Ki loy ma'ayni li chazali. So therefore, I'm not so scared of the people who are on the street. But you are the rooftop that's opposite my rooftop. You'll always look into my property. Therefore, I'm requiring you to help build a fence. I'll build half a fence. You'll build a half a fence. And that's it. We'll just finish with this. They should build, each one should build a little more than half. So the Gemara says, Pshita, one of them started building first. Mao the same he should say to him, why don't you finish up and I'll pay you? We don't both have to make a fence. You started building a half a fence, build the whole thing, and I'll pay you for that. Kamash Mlam, no. The Amalei, the other guy can say, at my life of it, why didn't you start making the fence? Why did I start first? You're afraid to make a fence, Bishum de Misra Ashisa, because it's going to weigh down on your foundation. If you're going to build a fence on your roof, it's going to put weight on your house. So you're asking me to build the entire fence? Ani namin Misra Ashisa. I don't want to put so much weight on my foundation. Therefore, I'm not going to build the whole fence. So I'll build half a fence, a little bit more than halfway. You build the other halfway, and because of that, now that we have a half, each one built a half a fence, we can't look into each other's rooftop. And so this is the discussion of building fences on rooftops. Okay, we'll stop right over here.